Hello, everybody. Welcome to tonight's episode. And what I would like to speak about tonight is a notion that very profoundly came to me today. I caught up with an old friend, and anyways, I began to wonder about the position of social behavior and its value, and where the efforts of civilization is going. I pretty much began wondering about the future, and I found, like, how would I say it? Imagine you sit somewhere and just wonder about where life will go in the next 1,000 years or something. Okay, so I found certain challenges to arise, and I noticed that we cannot avoid the data of the current moment. That means there's a way the civilization is behaving now, which is having a certain result. So the title of tonight's episode is Technological Boxes and Blind Desires. You know, Albert Einstein has this very nice quote where he says there's two things in the universe that are infinite. He says he says either the universe is infinite or like man's stupidity, and he's like he doesn't know about the universe. And so what that means is that human beings are pretty much choosing the best. Everybody is abiding by an efficient vision that their past holds. When you look at how Carl Jung divided the mind into, so before we wonder about the position of the individual in society and civilization, we're kind of wondering about the states of mind, or the way the mind of this individual is present. Carl Jung spoke about the conscious mind. He spoke about the subconscious and the unconscious, and the various relationship of the known and the unknown as it finds itself steering mankind's perception. So you see, it's not just Carl Jung. Many scholars, many philosophers, many people, I call them the curious men. These are the people who wondered about the depth of the world at first. Even before I was born, trust me, there's so many people in history who have, in some sense, tried to build metaphysical telescopes to pin down the roots of the imagination. So, anyways, where does this, what's the significance of this division of intelligence? One significance is that it's not all visible, so there's something to do. The fact that you're a temporary creature, it gives value. It gives value to your knowledge. So the thing is that if you don't have knowledge all the time, when you get it, you're going to be really into it, okay? And so the notion is that there are certain ways that the world is being shaped by your conscious attention, which functions as a subjective sort of identity. So there's a part of your intelligence right now that is appearing to itself, at least, or containing itself as a thought. Okay, so this is your conscious mind. Okay, this is the what you are aware of is your consciousness at first. The unconscious is what you feel stretches into the unknown, yet you cannot see the known. You know, this is why man has, his mind has always been inspired by revelation. His mind has always been inspired by portals to other worlds, you know? Just the relationship of the known and the unknown has been the story of humanity. What that means is religions are how the unknown moved the known, and sciences are how the known moved the unknown. Pretty much what I'm trying to say is that you're identifying with a moment of attention as a sort of thought and as a sort of presence. This presence, once you suddenly realize all of our species' knowledge is hovering in empty space. I'm not joking. Everything that this civilization has considered to be its knowledge, its education, its truths, its clarities, it is very obvious it is not. That means we are kind of like an ant under a pebble. And we have, in some sense, thought of like we're trying to explain why the human being is going to work. You know what I mean? That means there's certain ways that the microcosmic does not have access to the macrocosm. That was one of the findings of the yogic mind, that as it came into stillness and silence, its movements and its noises were limited. You see, think of it this way. Think of it, you before anybody telling you the notion of intelligence has to be based on what the person knows specifically. Like it's like, instead of you thinking intelligence means the instrumentation and classification of various streams of data that have hit you so far, think of it this way: that intelligence is animation. It is how something suddenly has animated in a way where it seems either the being is intelligent or the world is. And if the being is concluded to come from the world, the intelligence is the world's from the beginning. As if the moon can't look at the sun and say, hey, don't. it's like it's like the moon realizing its light is not its own. It's kind of human beings realizing their free will is not just the conscious container of their identity. Your identity shifts. Did you know that? Did you know that? That right now, as I'm speaking to you, who you were 10 years ago is, in some sense, the awareness of it is here, but the personality and the personhood has changed. Just in any moment where you have a new experience, the world shifts. It shifts in ways where blind desire, in some sense, cannot limit the town. And I consider myself to, I don't know, being incredibly drawn to writing. Sometimes I just go outside in society. I sit somewhere on a regular bench and I watch the world. And believe it or not, as I watch the world, I am watching minds in motion. It is not just particles in motion. It is various ways these particles have been designed, coming into a sort of interrelationship. You see, it's very fascinating. What I'm suggesting is that the reason mysticism was a sort of search for this sort of unconditional state. Okay, so this is a very unique idea. I want you to see that the innocence of people, it changes throughout the lifetime. There's this notion that as the person grows older, their mind will have been exposed to more data, and eventually they will settle down into an acceptable vision of the world. Kind of like the person can't always find the perfect tool. He has to just use what he has in the moment. Okay, this is a notion where the temporal aspect of reality, the fact that this show is temporary, it suddenly brings forth a sort of value system in place. This value system functions as a character in a story. Now, the reason, guys, I get back to this, because I noticed something interesting. When you go ask two different people the same question, you in some sense get two answers in two different universes. And so what that means is that there are commonalities in our questions, but not necessarily in our answers. Okay, that means, like, when 8 billion people tried to climb the mountain of civilization, not a single one of them walked the same way up the mountain. Do you see? Did not climb the same way. You are making so many different steps that even if you try to be like something else, you're going to see you cannot avoid it. This is why any person who, there was this notion of fake it till you make it. Whoever said that was like, either there's a truth to it, okay, but the truth is hilarious. Because the person faking something, it has not understood the presence of the moment. Anytime inefficiency appears in your present, in your sphere of awareness throughout the day, observe it. Sometimes it's as if like chaotic things happen, and instead of my mind reacting emotionally to the situation, my mind says, why is the data standing here? As if suddenly that spiritual man suddenly recognized the ever-present directions, the infinite directions of the mind. You will get to a point where if you just start, if you don't move and be still and silent, you're going to suddenly notice what is here is attention active. You're an active attention being the world. Your mind and your moment of being seem to be happening in the same place. So what that means is where the notion of our sense of self is generated is also where the notion of the world is generated. You know, every person is holding a world behind their eyes. They do not know it. They're holding many worlds, but they don't recognize it. Because society has only given certain options. And when people wait for somebody to give them the way out, you know what happens? It's as if there's something that the universe says, as if, why did this person not climb the ladder and wait for somebody else to, in some sense, take him up in some other method? For me, I'm telling you, you don't understand. If you choose to have a free will right now, you have to be responsible for all that this free will is leading to. That means the world becomes your creation because the free will is the creator, because there is some component of the intelligence that is saying, I am here before anything else. For me, it's very interesting. I was raised in an environment where in my childhood there were many people who did not just entertain religious notions, but also many supernatural and metaphysical notions were there. For my mind, I became disinterested in spirituality when I was, like, I'm talking about when I was 11. I heard these various concepts, and not by accident. I went towards it. My ears consciously went towards those concepts. Okay, and so I'm telling you this, that I was in a setting, so in Iran, in the underground, kind of, sometimes there would be these gatherings where I was, of course, just a child being there because my family was there. But it was one of those situations where people sat down in a group. So imagine like 20 people in suits and dressed well who have gone to a gathering are sitting down, and each one of them is seriously speaking about how the universe is animated for them, how the living reality is occurring. You see, everybody has a great story to tell if they begin to realize that their story is their eyes. That means there's two options. Either you wait for the world to change you, or you change the world you're waiting for. So pretty much the pilot of consciousness navigates as either a self or navigates as the world in the self. This is very profound because it's like scientists. It's like scientists are telling us our body is atomic, and these atoms are kind of like, we are stardust. We are ever-changing stardust, as if stardust is attempting to be a civilization, and man is attempting to be beyond an animal. It's fascinating. There's so many changes occurring in this planet that if we chose to seek out an individual reference-based truth, you see, a truth based on reference will never remain the same. It becomes doubted. That means if I say, hey guys, the truth of life is a glass of orange juice, you know? Imagine I say that, and suddenly people in the world imagine they were believing like the truth of life is a glass of orange juice, you know? Do you know, like, I'm just telling you, do you see how the unexamined life is not worth living, as certain philosophers said? And what is the examined life? And if the examined life is like in some sense, how does your intelligence happen throughout the day becomes a deeper question when the gentler levels of reality have, in some sense, you can say in quotations, synchronistically open to you. You have to, this world is alive. You know, think of it this way. Think of the greatness partner or lover you've been with, you know, somebody who really saw who how your eyes were open to the world and you saw how their eyes were open, and there was a sort of commonality of a mutual continuity. In some sense, what I'm trying to say is that something you care for, you cannot have, you won't be dishonest for. Do you see? It's like you don't understand how much people are denying the world of their true self. That means I was talking to people, and trust me, we're in a, because there's so much ideal worship going on, of a side product of this, you know, a side effect of this, a symptom of, not a symptom, but like a side effect of this is pretty much people walking with many faces. And I cannot tell you, it's hilarious to me. You know, this is why the fool suddenly entered paradise. You know, and people were like, how did the fool get into paradise? And they're like, the fool got into paradise because the fool was too foolish to believe in an illusion. Do you see? It's kind of like the same sort of virtuous innocence that people find in a being who has opened its eyes anew. For me, you don't know, have not become children yet. We have not cared to learn from the freedom of the mind prior to its restrictions, you know, being entered into it. So what I mean is that, trust me, your parents did not just spoon feed you baby food. Your parents also spoon fed you communication language, and as the mind began awakening to the world, it held the world in its arms. That means there are some poets who have, in some sense, they have found themselves not in a romance with just like a personal romance, like like various personalities coexisting in efficient harmony, and you know, a sort of playful infinitude there. But I'm telling you, there's it's one of those things where you recognize divinity is presence. I'll tell you anyhow, I'll prove this to you in a very interesting way. Back in the day, in primitive cultures, like in villages that nobody would ever visit, when suddenly a traveler would come, people would see it as divine. They were like, holy shit, nobody has come into this town like for so many years. Suddenly someone has come. Suddenly a new pattern has entered the system. You see, the issue with a temporary body which is eternally trying to continue, like so many people don't realize evolution is an eternal process. Do you know how many civilizations have this earth has birthed, you know? I've had various theories on how the world objectively, like how consciousness, the subjective evolution began. I have various theories on it. That means there's been various ways I've looked at the world, and I've seen a potential that it is that what we know is actually the unknown. It has forever, it has since our childhood been the unknown. What you fear is something you are. Do you know? What that means is it's the difference between reality and imagination. Why is it people can watch a scary movie where there's, you know, death of people, but how come in reality suddenly they see it happen, it breaks their heart? Why does that happen? Why is our entertainment cruel and we are silent, but why is the physical world cruel and we're loud? You see, I find that it's because we have thought progress has meant the ego. Or, in other words, we have thought individuality is the only purpose of living. That means nobody came and told you in your educational system, hey, child of the world who's here for a little while, in 100 years on this planet, how about you recognize after 4 billion years, 4 billion years, this science project called humanity has reached this sophistication, and nobody has ever been able to attempt what you can attempt on this planet because nobody has ever lived in the way you are living. You don't understand. We are all holding lanterns and marching through the abyss of space and time. This pitch black abyss of space and time. Trust me, there's ways that the mind, it has to do with natural acknowledgement. A person who's not in alignment with nature, just by the nature of their being, they have not realized it. Let me tell you what happens. They're going to be a performer. What I mean by that is that you will go out acting various programs of your conditioning and environments. So the first thing is the child has to free its ears from the wrong voices. And these voices are the restrictions and limitations and inefficient visions of the past. Trust me, the past did not just give us the future, they also give us a lot of their mistakes and things that they could have done better, but they didn't, you know? We have to, in some sense, honor the past, at the same time be like, okay, our ancestors, rest in peace as we build the world, you know. For me, it's I've kind of, like what I've said so far, I've been diving into the position of civilization, and now the title is a suggestion of the movement of this position of civilization, where, again, this science project called humanity, you know, it cannot be restored. Let me tell you why. Let me tell you why we can't salvage some of our mistakes as a species. Because uh, it's not just our physical bodies that are temporary, it is the potentials of the expressions of intelligence. So let me tell you something, for example, okay? Let's look at the lives of three kinds of people, the lives, like how they're living. Okay, sometimes wisdom is not something you ever can be told because it has to come from how you have acknowledged the living world. So many people are the way this, and this is something where the secular mind should immediately find some sort of replacement for metaphysics in its narrative, because it's one of those things where your eyes have no owner, and because they have no owner, they are the god of the moment. So you see the ideal of freedom of the secular viewpoint and the idea of in some sense, um, of the religious salvation. They both want to get somewhere better. Yet their philosophies don't match. And so, you know what's going to happen? I think this is the best way. The thought came to me right now, but I think this is the best way that I think this world, this civilization can be structured. We keep our individual dimensions internally savage, and we do it in a way that is playful. We embed in this serious civilization doing messed up things and all this stuff a program of playfulness. This program of playfulness is pretty much very fascinating. It's like throwing a mirror in a simulation. You know what happens? The simulator wakes up. That's our only task. You have never, I don't, like, I personally believe this, you know, I feel no teacher on this planet has ever taught anything to a student. Ever. Now, let me tell you why. Because the way the teacher shared the idea and its values that were emanating from the eyes of the teacher, the eyes of the student never had those eyes. Do you see what I mean? That means, for example, when you read a book by like Charles Darwin, what is reading? It's ink on a page, instantaneously translating to various patterns that your mind records. Now, I don't want to say record because the mind is not just this machine of linear time. We think that the mind is this playful kind of, I'm going to be, it's like this drunken master kind of intelligence. In unconsciousness, like the yin yang symbol, there's suddenly consciousness administering. Suddenly, in the vastness of the of collective consciousness, there's an individual unconsciousness. You know, guys, you gotta hold on. I gotta connect the charger. So I'll continue like this. Excuse me. All right. The child's eyes open. It finds itself in a world where waves of data are hitting it. It sculpts itself out of the various experiences it has with the world. These experiences have a sort of classification mode where the person suddenly sees, because you dream when you sleep, you suddenly have imagination exist. Okay, and so imagination becomes its kind of own level of mind. So pretty much we are this kind of unique situation where creatures on a rock in the middle of empty space, okay, where billions of this pattern of planets are everywhere. The same way we use language is the same way we are going to become, uh, either we're going to get trapped in a technological box. That means we're going to reach a level of delusion in animalistic fulfillment of the desires of luxury to a point of chaos. So that means this is the thing: when somebody doesn't have too many challenges in life, they become irresponsible. This is why Galileo said you need to have enemies. to keep your mind sharp. But what he meant is not you should go looking for make enemies. You should be alert of the various forces of this world that bring about change. The child that has opened its eyes to this world has storified the world. It has storified the world it has boxed it and contained it. It has boxed it and contained it in a way where programs rule the world. Reality becomes a screen. If you think you're too much materialistic, reality will become a screen. Just like how language contains us, and language is a sort of design, a sort of program of associating symbols to objects. So pretty much the relationship of objective reality with subjective reality is language. How the efforts of communication are a sort of sophisticated high peak of evolution of just natural expression. That means the planet is a thought in a moment of being where all individual activities and all collective activities can be seen as inseparable. It's kind of one of those things where when people say you need to have balance in life, um, it's kind of like you can never give that advice to someone in an emergency. You can't suddenly somebody who's in a panic mode to suddenly say find balance, sir. You know, the world is being shaped, and the attention is moving from these shapes constantly, and that is how we're experiencing change. Can the concept of change exist if there isn't first one way of the phenomena being and then another way? We can say in some way it's only the cosmos that is here. Man was never here. And there's a way of seeing that only man was here and the cosmos was never here. And so we are the most unique point in our history and we don't realize it. We are at a point where the animal, in its wonder of the truth of the world, the depth of the world, it suddenly duplicated all the data it saw objectively into a space where in that space that data was malleable, flexible. That means I could tell you, just look at some object around you and now imagine that object like the same object, also like copy pasted, and it also like there's another, like right now I'm looking at a cup. I could imagine like 3 cups just hovering in the air beside it. Where my imagination is and where reality is, their intersection is the moment of the intelligence where the body is apparent. So on some level, as if this is the true mysticism, is about the exploration of truth, pretty much, because everything will eventually lead there. Everybody wants to see the real picture. Okay, I'm listening to a Hans Zimmer like soundtrack compilation, so I think that this is going to be a good point of the talk. Um, Here, the mind obviously has an unknown aspect and a known aspect. The known aspect is your creation, it's your free will. The unknown aspect is too unknown. It's something, it's like dark matter and dark energy. It's too dark to see what is there, but seems to be there. It's it's um it's a matter of recognition that your moment is multidimensional, and because it is multidimensional, it follows the law of infinity. Your imagination, the reason you can instantly imagine something, because a part of your moment of intelligence, whether associated to the biological body or to the whole world or to the whole moment, whatever measurement you like. You see, it is, I feel it's possible only to lie to others because you can never lie to yourself, okay? But trust me, when you never wonder about who you are and you live life, the programs of the environment define you, as if the lonely creature runs into this busy world, not realizing not every system is embracing it based on the being's true nature. Sometimes it's not about just like, how can I tell you? It's about it's about the value of the best that could have been done. That is the only true value, because like it's very easy to recognize stories or how our attention animates life. Anything you look at is in some sense like your attention is your eyes are like the sun of your imagination, and it's as if a sort of attention is permeating as a field of being. So that was the cool thing for me. Like that's why Native American culture was, I was so incredibly like uh, it was incredible for me because I recognized the spirit of nature is the living world. And the living world has given these bursts and fragments of various species on this planet. And we are this one species that, I don't know what it was, but we stood up in ways that many animals on this planet are still asleep. The thing is, um, it's kind of like, I'll tell you something cool. I find there's different ways that a person can communicate, and communication is simply where how far the light of intelligence shall remain is unknown. Um, Either the person chooses to abide by how the changing world is being the change of the self, the person no longer can have a belief on life. So you'll be like, what do you mean, Mr. Within? You can't have a belief on life. Because life is not a static image. It is not one chunk of data that you get an interpretation for. Heaven's clarity was the non-existence of hell's door, you know? It's what I mean by that is a recognition of an abidance of how the system is. So this is the whole idea. We don't realize there's an intelligent system going on, and we're not just chunks of atoms thinking there are thoughts that they can't see but they're aware of. Like, you know what I mean? Like oh man. Sorry guys, sometimes when there's pauses between um, this kind of live stream is because language gives momentum, and language evokes imagination. So what that means, if somebody comes and tells you like, uh, is it a good day? You'll actually suddenly that thought will project in how your intelligence interprets it. So first comes the appreciation of the self of now. So how you're seeing yourself as a self, you have to look at it, recognize there is a, you're as free as the world is. Think of it this way. So if the person, how can I tell you? It's like as the religious man was going to heaven, the secular man was returning to the dirt. Nature is changing consciously. We are choosing to be points in this whole system. We're choosing, our individuality is necessary, yet at the same time, if all of life becomes centered around the individual, then what's the point of this whole collective phenomena? What is the point of, in some sense, a species not recognizing that when we look at birds, they fly in waves? When we look at like fish, they move together in a synchronistic way. So I was like, okay, what's going on? It's about the greatest collective vision. And this greatest collective vision, nobody cares because everybody's too busy. Excuse me, but everybody's obsessed with their self. It's undeniable because you have to keep this self surviving, so that's your attention is always on who you are. But the point is, if who you are is all you see, you will become blind to the world. Then your desires will be these savage chains that pull you to misconduct. Some things end, but existence seems to be continuing, you know? It's as if somebody, guys, this is like, you can see, listen to this playfully, like as if somebody came and said, hey, everybody, I asked the earth to turn the other way, and the earth has listened to me. And people were like, what do you mean? No, that's not true. And suddenly, like, let's say some astronaut uh, who was already in space cared and suddenly somehow found a way to recognize this. How a sphere in empty space is orbiting. How hilarious is that idea? How do we know it's orbiting? You know, I mean, like definitely we know it's orbiting, but I'm telling you, it's how it's a philosophical inquiry there. Um, What I'm trying to tell you is like suddenly that person, they come and say no, you're wrong, and then the person, they're saying, why did you say like that you changed the way the world was turning? And he said, I just wanted to test you guys. I just wanted to test and see if the civilization is still aware of how it's turning, you know, how it's changing, how reality is it moves and it grows, and it's not just like many relationships in life change. So pretty much people will seek the satisfaction of the appreciation in that change. And conscious change is work. So whenever you work, you're consciously changing. You are in some sense integratively moving on. Okay? But like there's various modes and there's various states of being. And a person can live in this life in such a unique way where it's as if it's like they never were a thought. It's all design. And so it's very incredible because the mind, it's as if the mind was here first before the body, and we are trapped in the mind sphere. So we can actually never know intelligence of the world. And we're like, what's beyond this box? How do we break the limitations of the past that are on the visions of the future? How is that possible? And I recognize it's very easy. It's like you negotiate with blindness. Do you see what I mean? And so what I mean by that, I'm not talking about physical blindness, guys. I'm talking about arrogance, which is The person is choosing not to acknowledge many dimensions of life because they think the dimension they're in is only what they are. It is the foolishness of the child echoing in the adult's mind where violence occurs in the streets. And it is sad because it's as if the being has not understood the value of data. We are data processing creatures, okay? We can't deny this. But how the data is being processed, just like how like your heart beats on its own, you breathe naturally on your own before thinking. So similarly, many processes in nature are involuntary. You will recognize this, and Carl Jung and every philosopher pretty much understood this about the imagination, that the unknown moves there. It is a world that is, in some sense, the hand of the unknown is in the is shifting the certain thoughts of man. It is the waves of data. It's fascinating. It's like right now you think it's not raining, but you know how many ways intelligent phenomena is communicating at you right now? How much data throughout the day arises just by walking on the street for like 10 minutes. You will see it. You will see the various ways that directions are guiding people's life. So it's very important as storytelling creatures that maintain their existence with ideals of hope and efficiency. So what's the point? You know, why did we have to be, think of it this way, it's as if God created the creation suddenly realized that because God had created it, what was it to do with what it was created? Do you see? So, and then came this sort of very uniqueness where the eyes of man reverted back into God's responsibility for its how existence moved. You see, and it was a blessing in disguise, just like how the Shaolin master truly hits the student and the student falls. You know, the belief systems of the student of its own strength, breaks. And once the student realizes chaos has hit it, this is something, guys, very profound. Because first of all, I gotta share with you, I have this philosophy that all external violence must become internalized. And the reason I'm saying this is occurring. This is how we see so many kids when they get angry, instead of going in the streets and being involved in gang wars, are playing video games. Okay? We have to care for what's here, or we'll forget it. You know, that's the issue of civilization. It, It's very fascinating. It's like a question with no answer, because the question cannot even be fully grasped, because the conditions where the question arises from are changing. The ancient world acknowledged four elements, like their periodic table was like small, very small. And their periodic table was the four elements. Earth, air, fire, water, and ether was the fifth in some cultures. And what that meant is that the world primarily moved in five ways. That means all the thoughts of man and all your imagination, the ancients saw it mystically as if they move in those ways. When the person is angry, as if it's the element of fire that they must confront, you see? And if, for example, when the person suddenly enters a sort of heavenly bliss, it becomes that moment where they suddenly have to embrace the winds of change, not the winds of change, but the rivers of, in some sense, uh, uh, a contentment. A technological box can be said to be anything that is uh, containing the world of the person, and this container doesn't change as fast as the world. It's as if any thought that doesn't adjust to how the world has changed based on your new experiences throughout the day becomes an old belief. It begins getting dust, you know. Trust me, some beliefs can be very dusty, as if they have not been touched for like eons. They're kind of trying to be forgotten. There's always an opportunity cost, but the point is, it's like there's also various dimensions that the values of that opportunity cost can be seen. So the choices you can make, there are different entrances into active modes of design. So I personally noticed something that I was like, I looked at what I like, it baffled me how Leonardo da Vinci, with one hand he would write and with one hand he would draw. Okay, and he would, in some sense, he was so ahead of his time, as if his imagination was standing in a way where cool power, a symmetrical rhythm. So when you look at the human body, you see a sort of symmetry at work. Now, many people don't, this is not common what I'm saying, but it's like the spirit of symmetry. It's the spirit of the kind of chaos and divinity being reflections of one another, which is a strange situation. It's like an empty illusion, you know? Or like, sorry, not empty illusion, empty infinity. So imagine you see something that's so infinitely beautiful and suddenly you see it's empty. And when it's empty, what do? The Zen masters drank tea, guys. They drank tea and contemplated the empty, you know? Think of it this way: the child imitates the father figure when it's young, because the father figure is a part of like the world it trusts, in some sense, that it feels it can also be. So just like how the father looks at the son and the son reminds the father of how he was a kid, suddenly the kid is looking at the father and trying to visualize what it would be like to be the father, you know. Not to be the father, but what I'm saying is to in some sense be able, at a state of inner, uh, I don't want to say self-preservation, but I want to say it's as if you kind of see how life in its purity can be very incredibly maneuvered. And purity means not responding to all the data that comes to you throughout the day. So what does that mean? That means as you live your life, as you live the day, stop thinking that the idea of any inefficient idea, imagine fear or tension or whatever, just walk in this world, okay, as if it took you 4 billion years to get here. That's walk like that. Walk as comfortably as you can imagine that to be. Then you see the permission, that the freedom of mind that we all seek. Then human rights becomes important, because human rights is humans' minds being able to be free to be right. Okay. Now, what I mean by that, I was trying to be poetic there, but what I mean by that is that there is an inner urge. So just like how there was this evolutionary urge for this bewildered animal to somehow reproduce and continue forward, Um, uh, I'm trying to think like how in a few words I could kind of like share the last few on this thing I'm trying to say here. Um, our eyes evolve. We recognize who we are as our attention. So wherever our attention goes, the world gets access to that data first. Okay, so the person has to have some sort of authentic care to wonder about how they're looking at this life and how many of the values and many of the ways they've behaved with people and others and those around them has been because of the values they have seen in that person. They never really see that person from their eyes. Okay, so suddenly there's going to come a recognition of atmospheres of mind, okay, and how these atmospheres of mind must not all at first be united. Sometimes unity or unification or integration, these are higher acts of a civilization, you see? But they're not the intermediate stages. The intermediate stages is self-awareness. So trust me, I'll tell you, any enlightened person who's ever going to exist on this planet is going to say the same thing. It's like, what's the point of life? It's like to see what happens. You know, like that's enlightenment, guys. Light is being existence, and you're here. And how you're here is, it just, how can I tell you? Think of the same freedom um, an author has to be able to, back in the day in medieval times where like books were rare, imagine, you know, for the author to be able to share something that was occurring that point in history and to preserve it, you know. For me, many scribes in history have been trying to touch eternity. Efficient vision is the urge of survival. It was before just biological, then it became conscious, so it became subjective. So now it's not just atoms changing in the universe, it's people dying. Because it's people dying, we entertain the notion of a person. Because we entertain the notion of the person, the ego will forever exist. Because the individual notion of reality is being kept. That's why I'm saying treat language like a technology. Don't treat it like it's something you are. It is something being utilized. It is a compartmentalization of an instant allowance and can instantly change. There was a Zen story of these two monks, okay? And so one of them is a senior monk and one of them is a junior monk. And this junior monk is like new to monk school, okay? New to the monastery or whatever, right? So they let it go with the senior, with the wisest person in the temple or something, or I don't know, some senior monk. And so he's walking with the senior monk just around the town. They're just observing like how the town is, okay? And so as they're walking, they come to a point where they see there's this beautiful, very like attractive, like incredibly attractive girl who needs to cross a stream, okay? And so the junior monk, because he's new to monk school and they gave him like a code of ethics, he's scared, like you cross the stream when she needs help, right? So it was in some sense as if the monastic, the monk lifestyle was kind of like a restriction of intimacy. It was a restriction of love. Okay, because it was seeking clarity, and clarity is such an ultimate value that sometimes that value is not for human minds. Sometimes the point of life is not for you to know everything. It's impossible. But you can always know the unknown because it's everywhere. It's the awe in the stars when we wonder if, when our ancestors, if they, that's like the stars watch us as we, in some sense, fade. Mythology was a representation of us. Believe it or not, it had an astrological value in regards to constellations. Okay, and what I mean by that is that man did not just make like objects into thoughts. Like for example, I look at this object and suddenly it's a cup. It's a glass cup. You know, it has been given like a subjective kind of containment. Okay, but when I look at the stars and I look at the constellations, I begin to see it's the same approach. We have pretty much, I trust me, we're not that evolved. We're doing everything as everything else on this planet. It's as if there's just there's something more, but that something more is not for words, do you know? It's for an authentic appreciation for the value of what is true in your experience. Because it's very easy to be lazy with your awareness. And sometimes might be like, what do you mean lazy with your awareness? I mean that when you look at yourself in the mirror, you're not gullible enough to believe a story which is a generation of your mind. Your mind changes. The beliefs I had when I was a child have changed from the beliefs I have now, like after 10 years. You know? And so it's one of those situations where I see the self is changing. Even your physical, biological body, the cells actually change over periods of time. So you see, everything is changing slowly. You're pretty much never alive because there's everything is changing all the time. So similarly, it's like there can't be beliefs alive when the world is too dynamic. So the dynamism just evokes a new context. Suddenly humanity is going to be like, holy shit, let's just stop thinking about war and let's just wonder why would we not want, like, why would we not want to have war on this planet? What is the like? Why was the idea of world peace ever mentioned? Okay, when we wonder about that, we wonder that like, what is the value? And the value is people have to start off respecting a gentle ways of life. There should be ethical police, I believe. And ethical police should not be physical, like badged police. They should be just kind of like people who share to the world that uh, you're not just random process of nature. Because the idea of nature was not like, how can I tell you? It's like somebody thinking our eyes could never close because they were never open as this. There's a present awareness. We are in a field of intelligence. I'm telling you, we're not individual souls. That's our personality. We are a field of intelligence. This field of intelligence is hilarious because it is that moment where throughout the day you're experiencing yourself as a mind, as a field of, as a, like your awareness, like right now as I'm speaking, like wherever you are, your awareness of what is here and who you are is the sphere of your mind. And it has a known edge and an unknown edge. The unknown edge is all the thoughts you have on the world, and the known edge is what the world is showing you that it is. We must care for the world to create just enough peace for future generations to come up with enough genius ideas. Like, how can I tell you genius is shy unless the world is ready to listen to it? You know, it's as if, do you know how many people were like stopped inventing things when like they had to flee the country because war was going on? They're like, man, do these people not understand how much progress they have delayed? How much advancement they will never receive again? You see, I will tell you, there has been chaotic things. There has been like war. A consequence of it has also been the eradication of unique knowledge. Do you know how many books have been burnt on this planet? And you know what that means? Books being burnt means it's kind of like an animal's claw at the mind of man, which is the maintainer, which is the tamer. Your free your attention thinks it has to serve the world, only to recognize the world as a mirror of its own mastery, of how it's orchestrating its view. So if we follow our blind desires, we will be led into technological boxes. Technological boxes is, I'm saying, it's saying it has more of a philosophical value rather than actual, like, relating to technology, but I feel it can apply. What I'm saying is that I feel there may come a time in our history that there may be. I saw an artist draw a picture where in this picture there was a kid with a virtual reality headset on its face, and the kid was just in the corner of the room, kind of malnutritioned and kind of weak, and as if like he had been in a virtual reality simulation and forgotten to get out of it. And so it becomes one of those situations where I feel when we try to be God subconsciously through our egos, trying to continue as competitive animals, like, I will tell you, any attention to any inefficient idea for the civilization is it's as if there are some people who they don't have to care about order because they have considered their approach to be chaotic, you know. It's as if asking an angry man to calm down another angry man, you know. It's like that would just be chaos. You have to respect the world and its deeper dimensions open up. The samurai understood this. In Bushido, go read the, I don't know how to pronounce it, but Hagakure, something like that. It's this Japanese text about the true ideals. It's like these pillars of values that the samurai held that in some sense determined the strength of their mental mindset. And it was one where there was no fear of death because it was a process of nature. So nature occurs, but there was a sort of value of how the individual identity was administered by the intelligence of the individual, or just given, just thrown into unconsciousness. Who we are and what we are is the edge of knowledge. We have reached the language threshold as a civilization. That means we're recognizing as long as we speak different languages, we will not care for the eyes of the other language. You see? For me, I was like many people think American culture is very arrogant and not intellectually aware, even though there's sophisticated universities, MIT, with how much data the beings have chosen to, in some sense, process. When I see violence, I see, in some sense, I feel like I'm seeing a small puppy scared. Do you see? in the person that's being violent. You see, because the person has not understood Isaac Asimov, the scientist, incredibly, had this quote where he said it's like, violence is the last refuge of the incompetent. Isaac Asimov said this. What that means is the world goes into flames when nobody was like, whoa, why is somebody trying to burn it? We knew nobody cared. There was like mistakes occurring because we thought we were all living for ourselves. It's a cruel world. Like, what is this? You know, the story of Oliver Twist has stayed too long in our mind. We must twist the plot. We have to recognize we are. Your eyes are the world that's here. There's a divinity to that. Just how thought is matter. How evolution's purpose was so you can have thoughts about life. How insane, how incredible is that? It is just process of nature. I'm not, sometimes in these talks, I try to keep the past alive, so I try to tap into historical context or as accurately as possible. But I don't know how to tell you. It's as if there's one microphone, but there's 8 billion voices. And I'm like, these 8 billion voices, what will be the next level of their next level? Do you see what will be the evolution of our evolution? What if evolution was to the power of infinity, mathematically? We began to recognize it was the endless effort of the temporary to continue. We have to come to contentment with this life. It's a changing place, you know? That means the easiest way to explain death to children is that, hey son, do you see how like I was a kid and I'm grown and like you're a kid and you're gonna grow up, right? So similarly, everything in life changes. So death is a sort of final change, and find your own contentment and appreciation for life before your eyes close, before the final curtain is pulled. So in some sense, it's as if the wisdom of the world suddenly came to the being and was like, stop trying to be anything and just acknowledge the simplicity, the simple foundations of all complex views. And you come to the presence. You come to the present moment. You recognize the pure awareness that has been present since the beginning of your waking life, the beginning of your birth till now. As you have blown many birthday candles, and every birthday it was as if like there was some part of you that was like, oh, it's my birthday, you know, but at the same time the birthday implied you were not the same as you were last year. There was a growth, there was a change, there was an incredible movement of attention. Your attention can move. Your attention can move incredibly in the body, and that's how we see great martial artists move. They moved as minds. They fought as minds. They did not fight as bodies. When they fought as minds, their mind was the moment, so they found harmony with the moment. And so their inner reality was suddenly became a shield first and not the sword. As if this warrior, one person has taken a sword out and is fighting it, and this warrior has not taken his sword out and is just using his shield and is trying to use his words as his first sword to dismantle the situation, you know? And the person says something and the guy suddenly starts hitting the thing, and suddenly they begin to see the battle has been won by the presence of the mind. The grander awareness of the moment won the situation, but it did not win it in a competitive way. It acknowledged its enemy as its greatest teacher, as if the forces that oppose you, you must recognize your mind. Your mind is its response. Most people are living as an effect of their world. Their life, they feel it's like, oh, it's the effect of the brain, it's the effect of nature, it's the effect of like so many different ways we're putting thoughts into the unknown, on the unknown. Pretty much in a changing world, your lifetime, your waking life is the greatest performance of intelligence. Observe it, study it, and move on. That's the thing. The greatest thing that an idea can be is a mirror. And what that means is suddenly the person transcends the language threshold. They recognize their mind as the invisible strings of all materialistic values. All your materialistic desires and objectives are strings weaved of your mind. Your mind is ways that you see yourself occurring prior to actually applying the physical movement, as if your mind moves before you do. And so your mind suddenly sees, wonders about what's in the fridge. So suddenly, like your mind, like I'm sitting in the balcony, but my mind has wondered what's in the fridge. Do you see? So suddenly the mind has moved quicker than the body. And so the mind is the story that is imprinted upon the world. It is in some sense given to the world as a sophistication of intelligence. So thanks for tuning in, guys. I I want to start saying this at the end of these talks. I recommend anybody who listens to what I'm saying is um, to revive the art of writing and to begin writing your mind on paper and wondering about how your intelligence is expressing its intellectual landscape, but also its conceptual agreement. So how your inner philosophy of the world actually is matching how the world is, how much you care for the systems that took a while to be built. And it has been said from ancient times, it is always easier to break something than build something. A building takes years to build what can be demolished in an instant. So it becomes one of those situations where incredible efforts are made to allow complex designs to continue forth, yet these complex designs are not being valued because the civilization will enter a simulation pretty much. Like Jordan Peterson can give you a great lecture on this, and he even brings Pinocchio into it. I was so impressed. I'm like, this man has chosen Pinocchio out of all the metaphors he could have chosen. And it was incredible because it was a work of great craftsmanship. For me, any mind that has dared risk sharing anything with the world is a free mind. It is fearless. It is fearless in its recognition. And if you feel the world has been more cruel to you, you in some sense are in a cycle of suffering, and that's what karma is. You feel you can't get out of how the world is. But when you suddenly see, karma is in your mind. you suddenly see the Lord of Karma is how the attention was choosing to be displayed. We are all the incredible remembrance of an ever-present field of intelligence. It is very crazy, as if our minds found eternity before our bodies found immortality. That's what the notion of that's what I feel Buddha was made for. Like he existed to share that idea that our species is asleep, and these sleeps, these slumbers, awaken these gigantic inspirations, which become renaissances in civilization. It becomes collective evolutionary advancement. That means the whole world suddenly is like, enough of this violence shit. It's as if impatience brought world peace in an instant. So I guess I can end off here, guys. If there's anybody who has a question or wants to share. Oh, maybe I should say something before I end off about nature's decency. It's also so in a social landscape, you have to recognize the citizen. Its greatest contribution is to be honest, because in its honesty, it preserves the intelligence of the nature it has. So that means it's so much more important to be natural in life than unnatural. And we find this in artist communities and in like various like musicians in competition with one another, that they are in some sense trying to out conceptualize each other lyrically. And as they're trying to out conceptualize each other lyrically, they've kind of ran to the consumer, and they're trying to listen to everything the customer has to say, and they're seeing the customer is lonely, so we'll come in customer service and endlessly talk. Enjoy the show. Every day happens once. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Much blessings and all.